Okay. Are we ready to get started this evening? Yes? Okay. First, I want to welcome our guests here tonight. Mary Burge, Chairman Ed Eiler, Bob Marcus, and Pete Heaven. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your schedule to come down and kick off our visioning process here in Gardner. We hope to get a lot of great information tonight that will help us begin to chart a path for our place here in southwest Johnson County, because there is a lot going on. I understand you will see lights to the west beginning this evening, so continue to see those lights for years to come. We're going to kick it off. Cheryl, you are first with Mary, right?
I am.
Okay, great.
Me first? I think the plan is that Mary first, correct? Sure.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I know that you will get to know these three gentlemen as we move forward this evening. I personally just want you to know that there are four people up here who have spent a lot of time of their careers and their lives helping to build this county, and are completely interested in having it continue, and are happy to have been invited to share some things, but also to assist. I'm hoping this is the beginning of a very nice, long journey, because that's what building communities is about, and that we're able to be with you tonight. We have asked Cheryl to start with the state of the numbers as it relates, because for those of us who understand, economic development used to be the good old boys in the back room with a cigar shaking a hand, and that's not any of these people. So that was a long time ago. And today it is a lot more scientific, it is a lot more professional, it is a lot more research-based, it is a lot more information-based. So as our community and our world in Kansas has gone from an agricultural community to a manufacturing community, you needed lots of resources, because manufacturers located where there was a lot of water or a lot of power or the right location. So when General Motors went to Detroit, everybody in Houston who needed a job drove to Detroit. And after that, the evolution of Johnson County starting to grow, and I was noticing tonight, mayor in 1902, and I thought, oh my gosh, you all were a city and have been a city a long time before you are even a part of a metroplex or a suburb. So you have a lot of history that I think becomes an asset for the community long term. But we evolved in the 80s and 90s in this county to a service-based community, and we were one of the leading counties in the country with that. And service-based businesses have a couple of things. They don't use a lot of equipment, and they use a lot of employees, and they're very mobile, because they throw the computer in the trunk and move across the state line or to Dallas or whatever. Johnson County actually competes a lot more in the world than they really do within the metro area. But now, as we look forward, for those of you who understand and were a part of the education research triangle, the new economy, or the new economic development world, is a lot about the knowledge-based economy, and has even stronger, deeper ties to education as we go forward. Higher ed, training, BOTEC training, technical manufacturing, technical services, tech companies. Somebody the other day, I think, Bob, and you could verify this, at Kansas City Tomorrow, said there are 40 iMedia, right up over my head, companies in Missouri, and 37 of them are in Kansas City, Missouri, or something like that. So we're like right there with the new economy, with life sciences and so on. So the issue is what roles and what pieces can be put within the community. But what it does is it changes that dynamic. Because in Johnson County, we've always been this way, but the rest of the country has not. Now it's going to be, you better have the quality of life that attracts the labor force, because the companies will follow the workers. And that's what they're going to be doing in the future. So it changes what we do in economic development. And that's kind of the thing we want to get started in talking about this evening. But we really thought that it would be helpful for Cheryl to start with just some baseline numbers and demographics about gardeners, so that we've all got presence of mind of here's today's situation before we go forward. So, Madam City Administrator, you're up.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? You need to hear it. Okay. I'm sorry to have to be at your back, but Leading is also following. So I follow directions when staff tell me that they're not able to pick up the recording if I'm not here. Tonight, I think we have a unique opportunity to develop a course of action that will lead to ensuring the success of the City of Gardner. I learned early on, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And before we start to decide where we're going, the first thing we need to do tonight is establish where we are and define our characteristics. So we're going to go through a series of demographic information and just kind of talk about who we are, City of Gardner. So who are we? Population growth. In a previous staff presentation, you heard that the City of Gardner experienced rapid growth during 1980 and 2010. And the Parks Master Plan cites approximately 45,000 population by the year 2020. We know that the city has doubled in size every 10 years since 1980. And you might conclude that with the economic downturn, that we're not going to see the kind of growth that perhaps the Parks Master Plan has indicated, or even what we saw from 1980 to 2010. But even if we take conservative numbers and say, instead of doubling, let's reduce it by 50%, and let's only take half. By 2020, we'd be at 30,000, and by 2030, 45,000. So the message is clear, and that is growth is headed our way. Who are we population by gender? While the numbers have doubled in terms of population growth, we're seeing also that we're having a balance of males and females, which is a fairly good indication that we're getting units. We're getting families. They're coming together. Who are we population by age? If you look at this graph, you'll see that the fastest growing segment is that 18 to 64 age group. While in the 0 to 17 age group, we experienced an increase of about 2,500 to 6,000. We saw skyrocketing numbers in the 18 to 64, from approximately 5,000 to just shy of 12,000. So we more than doubled our numbers in this age bracket. Age bracket also equates to kind of peak earning years, and that's important because we want to know whether or not we have residents that have disposable income or the types of services that we might need to provide. And what we saw trailing behind the 35 to 64 age group is that 20 to 34, which is kind of that entry-level workforce, and then behind that, kind of our youth of 5 to 19. So our workforce demands or needs are great, and they're going to continue to be great. Now, interesting, 33% of Gardner's total population is in their peak earning years. Sounds like a lot until you start to look at other cities throughout Johnson County. And what we found is nobody is less than 50%. They're 50 and 60 and even larger. So we're really low in terms of the percentage of residents that are in their peak earning years. And what we need is kind of a balance. We want more of a diverse mix of just social economic backgrounds. What about educational attainment? The high school graduates or higher reflect about 94%. If you look at the overall Johnson County, it's about 95%. So we look fairly good there. When you get to the bachelor's degree or higher, in Gardner we're showing about 31%, but Johnson County is showing over half. So the need to grow our highly skilled workforce of college graduates to be more reflective of Johnson County exists. What about households? There are several components of households that you want to look at. You want to look at the house value. You want to look at the mix between owner versus renter, the median household income, as well as the person per household. So let's start with the average house value at $165,000 plus or minus, and the county's average house value is $212,000. So the county average home value is 28% greater than what we have in Gardner. If you look at the median household income of about $65,000 for the city of Gardner, the county's median household income is almost $75,000. So the county's household income is about 14% greater than what we're seeing in the city of Gardner. And then the statewide median household income is a little over $50,000. So if you look at us and compare it to the state, Gardner's household income is 29% greater than the statewide numbers. Owner occupied, very good numbers here, in that we show vested residents, 72% right on with Johnson County, which is about 72% as well. Persons per household, 2.83. And our residents are traveling for employment, which, as we know, we don't have a lot of opportunities for them to work in the city. And they're traveling a little bit shy of 30 minutes. And we have residents in Johnson County that are traveling about 20 minutes. So a little bit better mix in other parts of the county, not quite the mix we need here in Gardner. When you look at our household structure, this kind of confirms the previous slide of kind of the balance of male-female, where we're getting kind of the family unit. So we have the ability to look at developing recreational programs or programs for the family. We've got a good, stable community of families that are coming, young families coming to the city of Gardner. So, challenges based on the data, based on what staff looks at. The city has not cultivated success in terms of business development, thereby kind of leaving us with a daytime economy and a shortage of jobs for our ready workforce and our upcoming workforce. While our surrounding communities have perhaps more aggressive economic development plans to attract both businesses and residents. Lack of second-tier housing related to low basic income and residents in their peak earning years. As a result of the rapid growth we've seen from 1980 to 2010, the infrastructure that the city has is near capacity. So it's going to be very important for us to evaluate all sources of revenue, all available revenue, and try to align them for the best capital improvement programs possible. That will be one of the most critical things as we go into the budget this year that we can look at, is how we align capital projects to develop the infrastructure that's needed. And our tax burden to our residents is high compared to other jurisdictions in Johnson County. We see that we have overlapping funding needs with the school district, and we can only tax residents so much. So there's definitely a need to look closely at revenue. And while we have challenges, I wouldn't leave you with just the challenges and not talk about our opportunities, because Gardner is certainly on the cusp of a major transformation. So we have opportunities in that our workforce is in place, and we have that up-and-coming workforce of younger residents. We've got good home ownership rates, stable family structure, residents who are vested in this community. We have financial resources, somewhat aligned with other areas, so we do have people who are in their peak earning years that would have disposable income. and we're poised for growth. So as we move forward throughout this visioning process, it's going to be important for us to maintain the financial stability that we have, as well as create a competitive advantage. It's going to be important to have efficient and effective government. Economic development is going to be what we live and die by. And because we have such a young population, civic engagement or public participation is going to be important for us. So, we have a great history where the trails divide, and an even better future as we move on the trails to success and developing a place where our residents are proud to call home and businesses look to locate or to expand. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have about that. Okay, Eric?
Thank you, Cheryl. All pretty good news, actually, you know, considering we're headed out of the 2008 bad news. It's now my honor to introduce Chairman of the Johnson County Commission, Ed Eilert. For Ed to take some time to be with us this evening, for me, is always a pleasure because he's got a pretty good handle on the bigger picture. And I think knowing what the county is doing and where their interests are as it relates to economic development and jobs, you know, the community college and Johnson County government are the two parts of the county that use a county-wide mill levy. So they get $7.4 million per mill or something like that. And so Ed has a long history of being involved in economic development, putting together very strong local government and business partnerships, of adding commercial tax base, and of being a part of a lot of good public policy decisions that have helped the county grow. So please join me in welcoming Ed Eilert.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure to join with this distinguished group this evening and talk about what might be coming down the road. Mary, I've got a PowerPoint, but I can't read it, so I have to have my own copy. So there should be about 18 or 19 copies, and so it might be easier for you all. I'm going to try to do three things. It just kind of give a today overall economic viewpoint of Johnson County, and no, I've got one. You've got one. Yeah. And then talk a little bit about. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll do that. Okay, that'll work. I'll start over again then. Want to really kind of talk about two or three different things. One, kind of give an overview of Johnson County economic opportunities, if you will, where we're at today, and then talk a little bit about some suggestions as to what you might look at as you think about future development of Gardner, future development opportunities. But first of all, the first chart, which one do I punch? There you go. Looking at residents employed in Johnson County, this is over the last 10 years. And the good news is, if you look at 2011, our employment level is almost back up to the peak in, 2007. So we have come through, if you will, that 2008-2009 debacle in the national economy in pretty good shape. Looking at the unemployment rate, probably says it as well as anything. In our 10-year average at the end of 2011 was 5.9%, and at the end of October, our unemployment rate had dropped to 4.8%, and in the latest numbers for November, that unemployment rate is down to 4.5%. So you compare that with some of the other areas, other states and other parts of the metro area, and you'll find that Iowa is right there with us, 4.6%. Nebraska, lower at 3.5%. Omaha at 3.9%. And the state of Kansas stands at 5.2%. I want to back up. Looking at the employment trends, in speaking with Doug Davison of SERI, I think it's at the end of June of last year, our job growth, as reported by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, is always about a quarter to 6 months behind. But at the end of June of last year, in 2012, the previous 12 months, there had been 10,000, a little over 10,000 new jobs available in Johnson County. Now, that's a pretty good number. That's the trend we are on. And I want to emphasize that because, again, that goes back, we're just coming out of the 08-09 situation. And dare I say, our new tax policy was not in place yet in the state of Kansas. And yet in this county, we generated 10,000 new employment opportunities. And I think the new tax plan is supposed to generate 25,000 to 35,000 new opportunities in the state of Kansas. So, we're doing pretty well. We're going to do a lot better, and there's good opportunities ahead of us. This shows you the, I guess, the industry breakdown of Johnson County employment, and the biggest 53% is in the area of information. I'm not sure what all that means, but I assume it's the new information technology, and then you can look at 44% professional technical services, and you can look at the rest of the breakdowns, but I don't get this one, 33% administrative and waste services. Cheryl, do we know what that means? That's my attempt at levity. I would ask the county manager the same question.
Lots of trash service.
I guess that's right. Here's the private. Next is the private sector payroll, and again, you've got a similar breakdown in the industry categories. Population growth, 2010, we averaged about 9,300 new persons a year coming into the county. Put that in perspective, you can look at those numbers. That's equivalent to a new Coffeyville, Kansas in Johnson County every year. It takes us about 3 3/4 years to for another city the size of Leavenworth. We match their total growth in just a little under 4 years. Job growth, again, going back to that number, the raw numbers show an increase of about 51,000 or 15% from 1999 to 2009. We accounted for 52% of the total net job growth in the state of Kansas during that 10-year period of time, and represents about 65% of the job growth in the Kansas City MSA. Business growth, the number of new businesses are also quite impressive during that same year. 1,500, a little over 1,500. That was about 13 net new business establishments per month in Johnson County. Been mentioned before, the educated workforce that we're able to provide potential employers is dramatic when you look at other areas of the metro, and we stand out significantly. About a month ago, I was asked to be on a panel talking about the new manufacturing. And when I got the request, I thought, why are they asking me? I mean, we don't have much manufacturing in Johnson County. What do I know about manufacturing in Johnson County? Except I was wrong with that idea as I began to do the research. And manufacturing in Johnson County, even though most of us, at least I wasn't as familiar with it as should be, is a growing big business in Johnson County. In the manufacturing sector, personal income in that sector totals more than $1.6 billion annually in Johnson County. Manufacturing accounts for about 5.5% of the total employment in our county. Manufacturing has about 21,750 jobs in Johnson County in 2010. And that average manufacturing job pays about $46,000 compared to about $39,000 statewide. And we account for 13% of all manufacturing jobs in Kansas. So when you look at opportunities, don't overlook what's available in the manufacturing area. Some of the largest would be Garment Industries, Garment International, Honeywell, and one that was not on my radar screen, may not be on yours, Script Pro LLC in Mission. Started in 1994, I'm told, now have 800 employees. And they manufacture robotic equipment that's used in the pharmaceutical industry to manufacture drug products. Some of the old names, the LexCorp, Gill Studios, and Vestcom at New Century, SOR Inc., Coca-Cola, and Pepsi, and ACG Flat Glass of North America in Spring Hill. Some of the others, Bayer, Healthcare, Williams Food, ADM Milling Company, Kramer Products in Gardner. There is a major impact by manufacturing in the southwestern part of Johnson County. 4.3 million square feet of development at New Century, representing more than 4,000 employees at New Century Airport. And second paragraph gives you some of the names involved. And Pete's going to talk about the intermodal, but major opportunities there. And you know as much about that as I do. In all, that combined operation is to create 7,000 direct jobs. And I would say this, don't overlook the spin-off or the support businesses for the intermodal. As I look back at the Sprint location campus in Overland Park, which they began construction in 1991, many hundreds of businesses located in Overland Park in order to support the activities that were going on at the Sprint campus. And that opportunity exists with the intermodal. Looking at a visioning process, I guess there are several thoughts that I have. Number one, I would start with inventorying my community's assets. What do we have in the community that we can sell, that we can promote job opportunities or to attract new businesses? Engage the community, engage the business community, the development community in soliciting their ideas. One of the hallmarks in Overland Park in Johnson County is College Boulevard. That was not a government idea. The developers of Corporate Woods had an idea as to what they wanted to develop and what they needed to support that development. They solicited private landowners along now College Boulevard to agree to create a benefit district to put in College Boulevard. And if you go back and read the press reports at that time, there were all kinds of naysayers saying, why would you build a 4-lane street that far out in the country? But the private investors, the private developers insisted, and the city said yes. And I've often wondered if we had ignored what the private development community was trying to tell us. But I think that's a primary example that you don't, the development community, they put their money at risk. Sometimes they put some other people's money at risk. But they have the ideas. Not all of them maybe are going to work, but don't overlook the input that they can provide to your visioning process. I don't know, does Gardner have an economic development arm of their chamber?
The Southwest.
Yes,
Yeah.
Tom's the guy, right. Well, I would do what I could to enhance and give that organization as much support as you can. Also, develop policies that will allow new businesses, new development to pay their fair share. I think you'll find within the development community acceptance for that approach. I think that's important so that the public investment that has to be made you can demonstrate the return on that investment. With all of that information, I think it comes down to collecting the information, analyzing, and deciding what kind of development you want to support or that you want to encourage to happen. Before my time, in the early 70s, when College Boulevard was just getting together, city fathers, chamber got together, and they decided we want to attract regional corporate headquarters to College Boulevard. They were successful. That approach doesn't work anymore because of the new technology. Once decided doesn't mean that you never will change. In Johnson County, besides the intermodal, what's happening with the Johnson County Education Research Triangle Tax at K-State Olathe, KU Clinical, KU Edwards, and also Johnson County Community College, even though they don't receive any of the money, are really exciting. And there are going to be some great opportunities generated because of that public investment and the activities that are occurring at those facilities. It's going gangbusters at KU Clinical Trial Center. They're doing some terrific things. Every major pharmaceutical company in the world has been at that location looking for projects and investments that they might make to develop the drugs that they're working on. K-State Olathe in the area of food safety and animal health. Bacchus, which is a service provider to veterinarians, started because of the presence of K-State. They will be at 100 employees in just a short period of time, providing health services to veterinarians. So, we got the Kansas Bioscience Authority located in a building there next to K-State. So don't overlook the possibilities there. I'm not, as I look at the intermodal, and this is not original with me, somebody brought it to me several months ago, what's the possibility of bringing logistic oriented businesses to this part of the county? American manufacturing, American distribution, it all moves now these days on an as-needed time basis. And so I think there's great opportunity to bring that kind of expertise, also those kind of businesses to Johnson County. So, there is no template that everybody can follow. We all have to make our own best judgments in the regard of what kind of development, what kind of communities we want to have. But I would say this, don't hesitate to plan. I was in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago. It was a good trip, a bad game at the Fiesta Bowl. But on one of the tours out in the desert, and I assume the guy knew what he was talking about because he talked a lot. He was talking about the cactus, and, what have you, interesting stuff. But I said, about 25 years ago, I came to Phoenix the first time, and I was at a conference somewhere, and as I rented the car, the guy said, well, now, you need to go on this 4-lane highway, but before you get to where you're going, the 4-lane highway will stop. And you'll come down on a 2-lane road, which will take you the rest of the way. And so I asked the tour guide, I said, has that changed in Phoenix? I noticed, there seem to be a few more highways. He said, yes. He said, I'll tell you what happened. He said, 25 years ago, the mindset of some community leaders in Phoenix was that we don't want all of these people to come to Phoenix. So if we don't build the roads, if we don't provide the infrastructure, these people will stay away from Phoenix. Well, they were wrong. People kept coming to Phoenix. And he said, we ended up with a situation where right away we could have purchased early for fewer dollars because of planning, now costs us an arm and a leg because development has occurred, because we did not do that forward-looking planning. So, a lot of challenges, but a lot of talent sitting around that table, and look forward to participating in whatever manner the county can. Economic development is the lifeblood of all of us. And I would say this, recently the county developed a development policy where we will not give any incentives to develop in the unincorporated part of the county. If dense development is going to occur, it should occur within the boundaries, corporate boundaries of the city. And so this is, we do not want to see the kind of expansion that the county can't provide the level of support and services for. We're not equipped to do that. So that's one small step that we've taken. Now, I would say this. We do have an incentive policy at New Century Airport. That land is owned by the county. If it stays undeveloped, we collect zilch taxes on the land because it's owned by the county. So if we can give a 50% tax abatement to Kimberly Clark or whomever it is to come in and get a payment in lieu of taxes, at least we're generating some tax revenue off of that property. So that's the one exception that we've made. Thank you.
Now, you'll have to learn how I play a little trivia, because when you hear someone speak, then things come together. When Ed was talking about the 10,000 new jobs last year, the whole state had 17. Pause. And then also, when he showed you the population growth, we know that your responsibility, and the hardest thing to remember, is that if we're adding a Coffeyville every year, drive to Coffeyville and count how many churches they have, how many miles of roads they have, how many schools they have, how many water things and So we're building a small city every year and still expecting you all to also do economic development and growth, but literally this county is adding that kind of infrastructure to accommodate 10,000 people a year, and that's still part of what you have to do along with all the other stuff you have to do. So our next speaker, and I am delighted to have him because he's the pro of the pro as it comes to economic development, in my opinion. Bob Marcus has been the head of the Kansas City Area Development Council for a long time. He has been, and it's a surviving job because he doesn't see a state line. He is to grow the commercial job numbers in all of the Kansas City metropolitan area. He does a great job at it. But the most important thing is that he's kind of the guy we use to check off, in the fact that we spend so much time looking at our own community or comparing ourselves to Lawrence or Liberty or whatever. He doesn't look at it that way because he knows we are having to be competitive across the country and globally, and he's the guy who comes back and says, you know, Mary, here's what they're saying about Blue Springs, or here's what they're saying about us, or here's what they're looking for in the future, or here's what we need to do. So please join me in welcoming from Kansas City Area Development Council, Bob Marcus.
Thank you, Mary. And Mayor and Christie, thank you for the invitation. Cheryl, thank you. I want to recognize the presence of my friend and colleague, Tom, Southwest Johnson County EDC. It's a delight to be here. And as I said to somebody earlier, it's great to be in this room now and have somebody yelling at me. Because the last time I was here, that's what occurred. Pete, you were there as well, I think. We've just heard about how Gardner is part of Johnson County. I'd like to expand that circle out a little bit and talk about how Gardner is part of the Kansas City area and what that means, how that information can be brought into your decision-making. Very quickly, though, I want to be sure that you know who we are. Mary gave a good introduction. But if you think of KCADC, think of the word A as the most important word, the area. And think of the fact that any region has got to have a sales team. All of these jobs that came here, the companies that have moved here, the people that have moved here, didn't just happen. It happened in part because there was an aggressive effort to tell the story of Gardner or of Johnson County or of the region and cause these sorts of things to happen. And we are the organization that represents the region in efforts to attract companies and people from outside this area into this area. So we serve 2 states, 18 counties, both sides of the state line, and like a chamber or a regional economic development organization, we are a nonprofit corporation. So we promote the area. We market Kansas City against other fine places in the country where a company or a person might choose to locate or to do business. So our competitors are Dallas and Denver. They're not Lee Summit, they're not Overland Park, they're not anywhere within this region. They are major metropolitan areas outside of this area. And we work with our local companies to create competitive advantage. So here's something that I want you to really focus in on. And a couple of points I want to make here. You see that these lines go out to Boone County, Missouri, into Manhattan, Kansas, to Lyon County, Kansas, and up into Livingston County, Missouri. Those counties are outside this 18-county area that I'm talking about. And the reason that they are part of this organization is because each one of them is housed or is owned to a major university. And we really believe, I want to just reinforce this, we really believe that a big part of the future of development of Kansas City is tied to the knowledge, the capacity that is inherent in our universities. And so in addition to KU, which is already within our area, we're delighted to have many other major colleges and universities that are part of KCADC, because development will always be about real property, but it also will be about intellectual property. Now, this is how we see the region, right? And I know what you're doing. You're looking at that map of the region, you're looking at Johnson County, and in your mind you're saying, okay, there's Gardner right there. We all know this situation very well. We know where these lines are, we know where that great big state line thing is. We live it, we breathe it, we grew up here, we're all very aware. But you know what? If you're a businessman or woman in New York or Chicago, and you've been given the task of deciding where to locate a new company or where to expand, none of those lines matter. You don't see those lines. And so our job is to make this region look like this. And Gardner is part of that. Our job is not to tell the individual stories of Gardner and of Edgerton and of Olathe and of Lee Summit and of Lenexa and of Oakland Park. It doesn't work like that. Our job is to get people focused on this region and then work with you to find the best possible solution within this region for a company that likes what they see and hear about the Kansas City area. Now, let me quickly move through a couple of other things that I think are kind of interesting, because we need to know about this regional product of which we are a part. The Kansas City area is a fairly good-sized area. You know, we hear about gross national product and gross regional product. It's hard to put these things in perspective. But let me just take a second. The gross national product of the United States, the value of all of the goods and services that we produce in this country, is a little over $15 trillion. That's the value that this country produces every year. You drop down to a state level, you can see where California is, just under $2 trillion of gross state product. Well, if we go down the list, there's Kansas, $131 billion of gross regional product, gross state product. But here's something interesting. The Kansas City economy is a pretty good-sized economy. If the Kansas City economy were a state, we would be the 34th largest state in the Union. The economy of Kansas City is bigger than the economy of the state of Arkansas. And Gardner is part of that. And you cannot separate out what you are going to be doing from the fact that you are part of a big metropolitan area. This puts that same numbers into a national perspective. If Kansas City were a country, it would be a little smaller than Hungary, and it would be bigger than Puerto Rico. Again, and Gardner is incorporated, is embedded within that. Just to show you how things have changed, and Ed talked about a lot of the changes in the county, and we looked at different metrics: educational attainment, population growth, and job growth. This is a metric that has to do with the product, the goods and services that are produced. And this is a very important one, because the ultimate value of an economy is not how many people are employed. It is how much productivity those people generate. What is the value of the goods and services that they produce? Because you could have 1 million people employed, but if we're all making $1 an hour, that's not the sort of thing we're looking for. So this gross national product, gross regional product number is a pretty good number. And you can see that we are not Austin, Texas. Austin is booming. Huge growth, 16% growth since 2008. But we're not Wichita either. Wichita and it's important that Wichita do well for all of us. Wichita, unfortunately, did not do well during that period of time. They actually dropped in the total amount of goods and services produced. And because many of us know St. Louis, I threw that in as a comparison. Now, some people will tell you that the region is just, we're just stagnant. You hear that sometimes. You pick up the Kansas City Star, and there may be an article about how stagnant the economy is in the Kansas City area. But if you go back 10 years, and you look at the growth that has occurred, again, using this regional product metric, the Kansas City region has added the equivalent of the entire metropolitan area of Wichita to our economy, to our community. And to use Mary's analogy, the churches, the roads, the service stations, the gas or the supermarkets, all of that that is in Wichita has equivalently been dropped into Kansas City in the last 10 years. So Gardner is a piece of that, and an important piece of that. And then finally, employment growth, again, echoing some of the numbers that we heard earlier. Now, let's take a look at what's going on within our own organization, because this is where you have a direct opportunity to participate. I want to show you the deals that were in our pipeline, the KCADC pipeline a year ago, and then we're going to flip to what is in the pipeline right now. So a year ago, we were talking to 24 companies that said, we have a distribution/logistics project that we are interested in siting somewhere within this country. We were talking to 15 companies in the IT business that they may be data centers. 22 manufacturers, and of those, 7 were in the advanced energy space. Ed was talking about, don't forget about bioscience. Well, we had 17 bioscience deals in the pipeline. That, a year ago, made up the universe of what was potentially available to communities within the Kansas City region. Now, we're not going to land all those, because there are other people around the country competing for those too. But that's the opportunity. If you fast forward to last month, the numbers have changed a little bit. You'll see that there are actually more manufacturing jobs, or more manufacturing companies for which we are competing. More companies in the bioscience space. The distribution number see, it's 21 today, it was 24, so it's dropped a little bit, but not much. IT has declined a little bit, but not much. Customer service was 11, it's now up to 14. That's the universe for which we are competing today. And that's the universe that Gardner and all the other communities in the Kansas City area, if all the pieces come together, have an opportunity to work to land into their community. Now, this is the same information, it's just presented in a little different format, and sometimes these different formats are a little bit easier to see. This really points out the difference in the manufacturing economy, for instance, simply by looking at the height of the bar charts. Same information, but presented a little bit differently. Well, where do these projects come from? How do we find these opportunities? Because you can't simply call up General Motors and say, would you like to locate another plant in Kansas City? It doesn't work like that. And so I want to share with you where this information comes from, because it can help you determine where you want to put your focus. And again, our partners at Southwest Johnson County EDC know all this. They're part of our process. So I'm telling Tom and others what you already know, but I want to share it with everybody. When we say a community partner, we mean somebody like a local chamber. Sometimes we'll get a call from a local chamber or EDC, and they'll say, hey, we've got somebody that we're talking to, can you help us? And so that blue bar, which was 13 opportunities back in 2009, last year was only 3. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen once in a while. The green is company direct, because we do talk to companies directly. We do talk to their CEO, to the chief financial officer. We work with them directly, especially smaller companies. Consultants, you see that gold bar. And the interesting thing about that is that number has jumped up. It has spiked, and it is now the highest, or tied with the highest source of opportunity. Bigger companies in particular hire people to help them make their decisions about where they ought to locate their business. These folks are called site selection consultants. We know who they are. They're usually handling the biggest deals in this country, and we pay a lot of attention to them because they are the ones that do the advanced work on behalf of somebody else. And while we may be talking to them about a project, they probably got 10 or 15 other ones in their back pocket, and we want to make sure that we get in the pipeline for future projects. We do pick up opportunities from the states of Kansas and Missouri. One or both of the states will call and say, we've got a company that may be interested and you're part of the region, can you help us? And the answer, of course, is always yes. So this is an interesting source of data, because when you're looking to recruit a business, you got to know how you get into the pipeline, and this tells you something about that. Now, frankly, we didn't have our best year last year, but we need to be intellectually honest and share that information with you. We are measured by the amount of payroll that we attract to the region from the companies that choose to come here. And if you happen to pick up the newspaper last week, you saw an announcement of a company called EC Manufacturing going into Shawnee, Kansas. They are going to operate in about 150,000 square feet of manufacturing space. They announced that they will create 252 new jobs. The payroll is about $11 million. They will be manufacturing a consumer product that has basically microelectronics at its foundation. If that had happened a week earlier, that 89 million now number would be 100 million, but it didn't. So I'm counting it for 2012. Dave, you can't always time these things, you know? All right, very quickly. We don't believe that you can just simply say, well, Kansas City is this. If you're in business, you know that your customers are segmented. You don't say the same thing to every customer because their needs are different, their demands are different. It's the same thing within our area. So we have created sub-brands. We have separate messages about the Kansas City region to different sectors of the economy. I just want to very quickly run through these. And these are the broad categories. So in the world of animal health, the messaging there is very different than what we say to somebody that's looking at a data center or manufacturing. And of course, if we're talking logistics or distribution, totally different messages. And then we talked about site selection consultants, and they could be representing anybody. So, very quickly, animal health. Ed talked about the world of bioscience. Bioscience really is made up of three categories. It's made up of human science, plant science, and animal science. And you always want to operate from your strength. Well, Kansas City is good in human science. It's okay in plant science, but it is off the charts in animal science. A third of what happens in the world it can be traced back to Kansas City. So we really want to build on that. And we have created something called the Animal Health Corridor. And we can get into that in a whole lot more detail at some point in the future. But I just want you to know that that's a whole separate initiative within the Area Development Council that is important to the future of this region. And that corridor stretches from Manhattan to Columbia. We have a lot going on. Just to give you a quick peek at some of what goes on. This is the annual meeting, if you will, of that organization. Last August, we had a lot of people in the room, a lot of separate companies. And where it says 9 active projects, that means that there were 9 companies in the room that were actively considering a location in the Kansas City area. If you're in the country music, you could have listened to Kix Brooks. We had an investment forum where we're raising money for new companies. So far, we've helped to raise over $60 million. Advanced technology. We've helped to create the Technology Council of Greater Kansas City. We call it KC Next. These are smaller companies, emerging companies, companies whose names you may not have heard of yet. 20 years ago, Garmin might have been a member of the Technology Council of Kansas City. And 20 years from now, somebody who is a member may be the next Garmin. But these are the kind of things that we do there. We'd love to have participation from you folks. Smartport. We know that Kansas City is in large measure based on the logistics and distribution business. It is a big business area. So one of our sub-brands is about that. And we have a corporation called Smartport. And anything that we do in that space, we do through Smartport. So some of the names that you see here are companies that we have worked to attract to the Kansas City area in the logistics and distribution space. And some of them are right here in Johnson County. We're not going to play this video, but if you go to the website, there's a whole lot more about Smartport on that website. This happens to just be an ad that we ran. And then finally, as we said, these consultants are very, very important to us. We need to get them into town. We need to go to where they are. When the Major League All-Star Game was held here last year, we flew 12 of them in from around the country. On our dime, we put them up in hotels. We paid their way. We treated them like kings. And you know what? 3 deals came out of that project, or out of that weekend. 3 opportunities to compete for a major business. And 2 of those are still very active. And one of them is a big deal. If it lands, it'll be 1,500 people. Makes all those expenses very worthwhile. These are just some examples of what occurred while they were here in the Kansas City area. Finally, I want to just say something that is going to be increasingly important. Because we've been talking about attracting business. But you know what? If you don't have the right workforce, if we don't have an educated, knowledgeable workforce, if we don't have skilled people, we're not going to attract business. And so there's a whole other program within our organization that we call America's Creative Crossroads. It's all about positioning Kansas City as the intersection, not necessarily of trails or of highways or of railroads, but the intersection of artistry and technology, and bringing those forces to bear to be sure that when a talented young man or woman has a choice, I can either go to work for Cerner in Kansas City, or I can go to work for Dow in Austin. You know what? Based on what I see, I think I'm going to go enjoy living in Kansas City. Those one by one decisions are very important to the future of this community. And so, again, if you have a chance, go to this website, follow us on Twitter, look us up on Facebook, and learn about not just attracting companies, but attracting and retaining talent to the Kansas City area. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I know we will probably have a lot more to talk about in the future, but it's been a privilege, and I look forward to that future.
Thanks, Bob. A little trivia time again, just to kind of keep everyone stimulated for the evening. When Bob was talking about consultants, one of the things that to remember is, as he sells the entire metropolitan area, is that consultants find most of what they want to know about you from two places. They Google and see of what kind of media and news you're generating as a community, and they look at your policies online. And a lot of communities don't even get seen by consultants because they are eliminated before the game ever begins. So when you talk about professionalizing and working in the areas of economic development and growing your community and targeting, site consultants, even if you don't get one, they talk to a lot of other people. But what they're looking for is reasons to eliminate communities, not necessarily keep them. And I remember way back when, we didn't have a policy for not giving any abatements in Overland Park when we weren't giving any, and they said, write that down. We don't give any, but if you don't have a policy, we can't get you into the queue. And it's like, oh, okay. So literally, that's important. Secondly, a big component to think about, particularly for our community, because we're always hearing, oh, you know, we don't have the mountains, we don't have the oceans, we got the coast, they're attracting the labor force. Bob is absolutely right. The focus on education is important. But remember that 80% of the new company startups that have come to the state of Kansas every year for about the last 20 years have started in Johnson County, Kansas. We have this huge resource and intellectual capital where we grow companies. And they're not all just Garmin's, but the next one got started yesterday in somebody's basement. And so the entrepreneurship piece is important. So as we move forward, taking a look at what other communities have done and how they've done it, one of the people to hear from is Pete Heaven. Pete is a partner with Lathrop & Gage. He is in all of the lists of America's best lawyers for real estate development. He does corporate law and real estate and also individual type issues too. Most importantly, he has worked for a lot of cities, and he's also worked for a lot of developers. So he has been on both sides and understands what makes those kinds of partnerships and negotiations work. And so Pete is going to talk a lot about what he has learned going forward as far as how economic development and the way to get those opportunities started. So please join me in welcoming Pete Heaven. I'm the only one that doesn't have his name.
I have no graphics, I have my notes, if anybody wants to look at it. Mayor and President, Cheryl, thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I have been kicking around the county for a while. I'm actually a fourth generation Johnson Countyan, which is a little bit rare. I left the county for about 2 days when I was born, and I've been here ever since. Back then, we didn't have a hospital in Johnson County. My fourth great aunt had a vineyard at Evie and Johnson Drive, and where the new IKEA is going in. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But at any rate, most of the people in this room associate me with railroads. I'm not a railroad lawyer. I've never been a railroad lawyer. The law firm of Lathrop & Gage began representing the BNSF in 1873 when I was in law school. I could not spell BNSF until 6 years ago when they asked me to do the Intermodal project. So that's how much I know about railroads. It is another development project, and that's what I do is development. I'd like to talk a little bit about what the development community thinks of Gardner, Kansas, because you've got something that every developer wants, and you don't recognize it yet, but you're going to pretty soon. You've got land. Every developer needs land. You've got good, open, honest government. And there are a lot of places in this metropolitan area where developers don't have that privilege. And finally, you've got hard-working people. Everybody around Gardner works. They work hard at doing what they do, and maybe they don't like developers. They do like development. So we're going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to finish early because I've never seen anyone in an evening meeting who didn't want to leave early. So I'm going to try to make this brief and to the point. If you don't do something about the opportunity you have right now, somebody else will do it for you. And I can show you cities throughout Johnson County that sat back and said, well, you know, we don't want any development. And just like the roads in Phoenix, you're going to turn around and it's all going to be here, but you will have no control over how it got here. So right now, we're on the cusp of some really exciting stuff. And yes, the intermodal will be the driver, But there are other forces out there that are going to push on Gardner too that you're going to need to know about, and you're going to need to react to it. So, first thing to remember is if you don't do it, someone else will. And do you trust someone else to govern the future of your city? And the obvious answer is no. You can't trust someone else to do that. That's your job. So what are we going to do about it? I think you have to start with a mindset of partnership. And as Mary said, I represent cities, I represent developers, kind of understand where each of them are coming from. I think they're both crazy half the time, but that's neither here nor there. Developers generally want not the easy way, they want the profitable way. And Overland Park, which is a very difficult city in terms of planning and high standards, developers flock there because they know the rules, number one, and they know quality. And that's what we need to do in Gardner. We need to exude the quality we have, and developers will come. Now, how do you do it? Let me ask you a question. In an R1 district, residential district, in the city of Gardner, can I build an $85,000 house? Yeah. Can I build a $150,000 house? Yeah. Can I build a $450,000 house? Yeah. Well, why aren't you asking for this one and not this one? Overlay districts, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And I've got a handout for you that talks about a very successful city in Georgia that used overlay districts and completely changed the scenery of its city. Same thing with commercial. Do you want a strip center with a dry cleaner and a liquor store? Well, you need them. Or would you rather have a junior box? Or would you rather have an IKEA? I can do any one of those in a C1 zone as a developer. So which am I going to choose? The operative word is I got to choose. You didn't. And I'm going to put the liquor store over here where you don't want a liquor store, but I still have C1 zoning. So by golly, I have a right to do that. So you keep your zoning in place, but you create overlay districts. And an overlay district is a vision. And you take half a mile square, let's just pick something, it's vacant land right now in Gardner, and it's zoned commercial. You as the city council, you as city leaders, need to come up with a vision. What's that going to look like? What do I want it to look like? What do we want it to look like to go forward? And then, only then, do you control your zoning. And it can be done very easily. And what I would recommend you do is be very inclusive. Bring everyone you can think of from the city into the same room. Let's talk about it. Let's see where we want to go. Develop a consensus. And then use an overlay district to get the job done. The word incentive was used a few minutes ago, and that's kind of, I do a lot of that kind of stuff. I call it investment, but then that's just a fancy word that makes people feel warm and fuzzy, but they're really incentives. It is legalized bribery. Let's just be real honest about it. You're bribing a developer to come into your city. Is there anything wrong with that? No, it's legal. And there are ways you can do it where it doesn't cost the city a penny to do it. Most of you have heard the term TIF, or tax increment financing. And the opposition will always tell you, well, we're just going to give away all of our tax dollars to this developer for 20 years. And therefore, it's a bad thing for the city. Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't want you to give away all your taxes. If I were going to do a TIF in the city of Gardner, I would take half the new tax money. You don't have to give it all to the developer. There are things you can do in between that give you a benefit and the developer a benefit. You can use CID, Community Improvement Districts, where, pardon me, the city or the district actually taxes itself. It imposes a sales tax on itself of up to 2%. So in a commercial district, that revenue can be used to enhance the product, build a better center with the money. Another way to induce developers. You can use industrial revenue bonds, which is another very effective way of saving costs to the developer and stimulating growth. Or benefit districts, as was mentioned earlier. There's a whole cafeteria line of different things that we can do to make ourselves attractive. Because remember, you have the land, you got the government, you got the people. You just need the developer. And when you've got these three, you're batting much better than most cities in Johnson County. So, we want to do incentives if we can. It's been about 2 years ago, I had a call from a would like you, if you would, to represent IKEA. And I said, well, I love car dealerships. I think that's a great idea. Again, it takes me a little bit longer than most people. At any rate, he said, if you want to represent IKEA, you've got to fully appreciate what an IKEA can do for a community. And I said, well, that's great, you know, it's furniture, and it's a great place to shop. He said, no, you need to go to Centennial, Colorado. That's where we just opened an IKEA last year. And I want you to study it, and I want you to look around, and I want you to get observations, because the only way you can represent us is to truly tell our story. So I pedaled my bicycle all the way out to Centennial, Colorado. And it was the most amazing experience, and if you haven't done one of these things, it's just crazy. It takes 3 hours to go through the store, and they won't let you out. They will not let you out of the store, because they have all these little habit trails like hamster shoes, and you can't find your way out unless you go by every darn lamp and every darn thing. So I learned from that it's going to be an interesting experience when you're talking about a store of 400,000 square feet that you can't get out of for 3 hours. You must have horrible traffic problems. So I asked the store manager, what about traffic in this town? They said, actually, traffic is lower at an IKEA than if it were at a shopping center, because people can't leave. So you don't have in and out all day long. You've got in 3 hours, out, in 3 hours, out. So the traffic count's actually lower than a shopping center. But while I was there, I thought, the one thing I need to know, and this lawyer from Philadelphia sort of cautioned me on, is look around. Don't look at just the store. Look around. So I made an appointment to visit with the mayor of Centennial. And delightful woman, very, very good mayor. And I asked her, tell me about the surrounding. She said, well, we really didn't have a city before IKEA came. We had a bedroom community. We had a few houses. It was a nice little suburb of Denver. She said, look around, and for 2 square miles, we've got retail development, office development, industrial development, and it spawned on what we call the halo effect. The IKEA started it, and the halo sort of emanated from it. And it goes out about 2 square miles. That's a huge area of redevelopment. And she said, we were warned, and we used zoning overlay. We used charrettes, which are, you know, organizational meetings where we talk about different types of activity we want in our city. We were very inclusive. We got everybody in the same room when IKEA announced they were looking at our city and said, what do we want? And we sat down, we penciled it all out, and we got everything we wanted, just by being ahead of the curve. Okay, let's apply that now to the intermodal. This horrible, nasty freight car, it's going to create a halo effect. And the halo effect is not going to be substandard housing. It's not going to be bars. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to give this city the opportunity to engage in retail development you've never seen before. Housing of the highest class you'll be able to find in Johnson County. Because of the workforce, it isn't all the lowest form of the workforce. It's executives with large companies. And we're talking about national companies. And Bob has been so instrumental and helpful to us in getting the right contacts. But you're going to see a totally different environment. Now, which way is it going to go? That's the question. Is it going to go north or is it going to go south? I think the people of Gardner have the control over that. But you got to start out with, what do I want? Pencil it out, and you'll get it. But you got to know what you want before you can get it. Well, I have one little graphic I want to show you.
Welcome. My name is Roger Clare, and I'm honored to be mayor of Bolingbrook, Illinois. We were named number 32 on Money Magazine's list of great places to live with communities over 50,000 people. But the strongest point of our community we like to think is our diversity. We have every race, color, and religion, which makes us a great place to grow, which is our village model. It's also a great place to live, work, and play, and we hope you enjoy this video.
First settled way back in 1832, Bolingbrook has since become a thriving village where location has come to mean everything. Just minutes from the hub of Chicago, Bolingbrook lies at the crossroads of Route 53 and I-55, as well as I-355, and is easily accessible to all the major interstate highways, making this spot a great place for business, travelers, and tourism. Not to mention a truly wonderful place to live, work, and play.
Here's one more.
Bolingbrook's commitment to building good business relationships and helping new and established companies continue to grow is evident in everything we do. Since 1986, 26 million square feet of industrial and distribution users have called Bolingbrook home. The Bolingbrook Area Chamber of Commerce was founded in order to fully support our local business community. Nearly 700 members make up the chamber and represent a wide variety of industries, including commercial, retail, industrial, medical, government, and home-based businesses. By providing education, networking opportunities, and hosting activities and events, members and businesses are able to find out about innovative ways to expand and stay relevant. Bolingbrook's location at the crossroads of the Midwest makes this progressive town easily accessible, ideal for doing business, with the conveniences of a big city. No wonder it's a great place to work.
Why did I show that? Anybody know? Bolingbrook is within the halo effect of the BNSF Intermodal in Joliet, Illinois. It was a city that was formed as a result of the intermodal in Joliet. It had been an old railroad town since the 1800s, and it was incorporated, I think, in 1985. And it is a classic example, and I think Cheryl's going to provide more information to you as time goes on, of the halo effect of an intermodal. The thing that people think is going to be ugly turns into something that's very beautiful for a city if done right. So I'm going to sit down now because I've said quite enough. And I just want to thank you all for having us here tonight, these distinguished people, my good friends. And if we can help the city of Gardner, we're always happy to do that. Just like tonight, we'll volunteer our time. We want to see something good happen in this community. So thank you very much for having us.
Your pleasure, Mayor and Council, to the extent of if you had a few comments or questions. Certainly we have a little time for that. However, the greatest gift anyone can give anyone is a little bit of time. So we certainly will wrap up whenever you're ready. I've got a few comments that Cheryl asked me to fill in at the end of the game, but certainly reactions, comments, questions. Oh, and Chairman Eilert has the first one.
Pete's videos reminded me, we have, and Tom's been involved in this, early, the county does not do economic development. And Mayor, that's one of the things that I miss, not sitting in the mayor's chair anymore, is to be involved in economic development. But I talked with our Johnson County Development Partnership, which is the collective cities and economic development agencies that they support, as to how we can promote Johnson County from an economic development standpoint. And we had several meetings, and we finally came to the conclusion, rather than put some words on a brochure that may or may not be handed out or may sit on the shelf somewhere, the commission authorized an amount of $60,000, which we could use in this effort, and we're going to develop a series of videos. For instance, one promoting Johnson County. This is where you need to be, Johnson County. Maybe focus on the BNSF for one, focus on the Clinical Trial Center for another, but have the ability to develop several different promotional videos for different activities, economic development activities within Johnson County. We will make this raw footage available to anybody in the county, city, economic development agency. We're going to try to have some of this work done by State of the County address, which will be about the end of March. We contracted with Johnny Rollins to have some great air shots of all kinds of facilities all over the county. And so we're excited about the possibility. We have a county staff member and Joyce Coker, I can't remember Joyce's last name now. Yeah, but she used to work for the Latha Chamber and has a journalism background. So anyway, that's something that's coming in the next couple of months. And again, you all can make use of it. We decided, you know, with social media, electronic media these days, that would be those represent some great opportunities to promote Johnson County as a place to do business. And so when it's available, it's yours to do with what you want.
Thanks for bringing Bolingbrook up. I'm Illinois born, and Bolingbrook is a suburb of Chicago. And in the 70s, they had this little amusement park called Old Chicago. It was an indoor amusement park and restaurants and bars and things. It failed. And so they had this big empty thing, and they didn't know what to do with. And somebody came and wanted to build a warehouse. And it was going to cost them a lot of money because they didn't want the amusement park. They just wanted what it was sitting on. It was expensive to get rid of all that foundation because they had, you know, fairly significant foundations to handle all of these rides. I mean, it was like worlds of fun under a roof. And that's what they did. They gave a lot of incentives back then to get that one warehouse. Now, their economic development policy is, yeah, you can build a warehouse, but we don't have any incentives for you. Now, if you want to build the IKEA, it was featured in the video. If you want to do something like that, well, maybe we can talk about it. But right now, as far as distribution centers go, we've got plenty, and we're looking to bring in, you know, office and corporate office, that sort of thing. So they, you know, over that period of time, as you know, 20, 30 years, they changed their goals, obviously. But you know, they began with that first warehouse and Risk, spent a good deal of money to get that started, and it worked out well.
Questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
We have a few minutes, so let's,
All right,
if
all right.
you have some questions, I think that's great.
So, you know, obviously with IKEA coming to Merriam, we're not going to get that out here, and we've got BNSF, and I realize that there's going to be a halo effect around BNSF, but I'm just curious, what is like the next level, the next satellite around a BNSF? What kind of business should be a satellite around BNSF that will help with the halo effect around the project? And, you know, how do we get in front of those folks?
I don't know, to be honest, but my guess is there will be a lot of small businesses who will be providing, you know, mundane service. I shouldn't use that word. You know, printing services, as an example. Those kind of everyday services that I need to run a business operation. Printing, you know, I don't know that there will be a big development. There may be, but I think initially, as I think back at Sprint, you know, the halo effect there was exactly the kind of small businesses I'm talking about, to provide services not only to the employees, but the company itself. And that's where, you know, I don't know that we saw a big corporation or a big project developed because of Sprint, but there were a lot of small business opportunities presented.
The other thing that happens is right, and there'll be restaurants and hotels and a lot of other service companies, and the reason that you want to encourage that, even though none of them may individually really generate a lot of economic activity, collectively they'll do some good. But more importantly, you begin to create the infrastructure that's necessary when the next big deal does come down the road, because then the hotels will be there, the restaurants will be there, the service companies will be there. and Gardner becomes that much more attractive than it is today. And we simply don't know when the next big deal is going to come. I mean, all of us sitting around the table have been involved in a couple of big opportunities that have come through town, and there will be another one. I don't know what it will be or when it will be. But Pete's point is right. You've got land, you've got people, the opportunity will present itself. And if between now and then, you can make Gardner a more attractive community in terms of its infrastructure to support business and education, the more attractive you'll be when that next big deal comes down the road.
And the halo effect isn't like rings on a tree. It doesn't emanate this way necessarily. The planning should be that way. But you may come out let's use rings as our analogy, you may come out 3 rings for residential and say, we want an average house of $350,000. Plan it, it may not go now, but it'll give certainty to the developing public, people who are out there developing, where they can put different things. It may not emanate directly out this way, it may start here in Backville. Just plan it all the way out.
And I think another piece of this, and you've mentioned it before, Chris, is it isn't just the pieces that need to go into place to prepare. I think the halo effect happens, I'm not going to say automatically, but happens with a receptive leadership and a receptive community. So that's why when Pete said, is it going north or south, that's your decision. And so I think that's a piece of it, because the issue is you have to do the self-examination. Does the rest of the community and the site consultants and the rest of Johnson County, do they think we're open for business as a city? Do you know, is there an image there or not that you are open for business? So I think that's a key that has to be decided. I think the beauty of what you can embark upon now is you do have all those assets that Cheryl mentioned and so on, is the ability to actually go to your voters and your citizens and say, here's the economy, here's how it works. What do you want to support this community? Because even on a housing basis, when you sit down and decide, as Overland Park did a million years ago, they said, you know what, we're probably not going to have a lot of warehouse and manufacturing. How do you suppose Lenexa happened? Because they said, we got highway, we're good with that. We got railroad, we got highway, we're good with that. They now have a 65% commercial tax base, which means their housing is 1.1 to 1.5% of property taxes on their value, and you're at 1.64, didn't we decide that, Dave, or something? So I think the halo effect can happen if you are doing the preparation that Bob is talking about, but also if there is this, ta-da, we're open for business, we're going to work with you, we're excited about growing our tax base. We think a business making a profit is a great idea. And trust me, there's a lot of governments in the metropolitan area that really don't think that's a good idea. So I think that you have this opportunity to say, okay, are we going to become a home to great young entrepreneurs? We have all these young techies out here. Why do they have to drive someplace else? Is tech business something you all could really attract? What's your piece of the triangle? What's your piece of BNSF? All of that process. And so it's not just, we're not going to just pin our hopes just on BNSF. You've got really an opportunity, because you are Johnson County based and a part of this Metroplex, to start targeting and picking the things you want to pick. You got all this infrastructure, this highway stuff is just, people would kill for it. So I just think I think you've got this opportunity, and the halo effect will come if you do the prep and you're open for business. Does that help any?
No, it certainly does. One of the other things that Pete was mentioning was, part of the reason that Overland Park was successful was that everybody knew the rules. And I think that we've got issues there right now, and I'm getting a new community development director that's going to start soon, and hopefully going to fix a lot of that. But how far are we behind the curve currently? Or are we?
You're not.
We're not? Very good to hear. Because that's, I know we've got processes that we want to fix, but, and my guess is that there's municipalities all across the metro area that have similar problems that we do, right?
There's one thing I would say is We talk about new development, and we need that, and that's great, but don't forget about what you've got, also. When I was green as a Gord councilman, the first committee I was put on in 1977 was a downtown coordinating committee. We were gonna figure out how to revive old downtown, original downtown Overland Park. That was in 1977, and about 1990, we finally figured it out. The result was a partnership between the public and private sector. You know, it's an evolutionary thing rather than revolutionary. But another example I would give you, you're all familiar with 9050 Metcalf and Metcalf South, which used to be the boom in Johnson County. Oak Park Mall was developed. The difference there, about 15 years ago, the developers of Oak Park Mall said, we need to do something. We need to bring new life to this major commercial asset. And so we set up kind of a TIF district, which allowed them to encourage Nordstroms to come in, to do some additional development of the center, put in some parking. You know, I hate to think where Oak Park Mall would be today without that investment that was made 15 years ago. And now, after all of these years, they're finally talking about, you know, similar tools to redevelop Metcalf South and 9050 Metcalf. So don't forget about what you've got. So.
And that's, you know, we do need to think about that. We've got two interchanges that are largely undeveloped. And those are you know, two places from which we can grow and expand. We have in the ground today lots ready to build on. So we've got a lot going for us. You know, we did talk about a community development plan. That was something that we took out of the budget, which, you know, I think many of us were arguing to keep it in the budget. That's something that we did take out. And that's really, I think, what we need to do going forward is define what it is we think we should look like, what we want to look like, and then get that plan and build it from that again. And it's not going to be an easy or quick process, but I think it's a necessary process.
Let me throw out one other what if, and the mayor and I have talked about this before. You know, KDOT's been looking at a 5-county study, including Johnson County, Miami, Leavenworth, Douglas. You know, where are some major transportation corridors that need to occur? And I'm encouraged, one idea that we've kind of been promoting at the county is a northwest connection between I-35 and K-10 on the west side of Johnson County. The only encouragement I have is that the governor talks about it every now and then, for whatever that means. But if something like that should happen, you know, two things: it relieves some of the I-35 traffic from the intermodal, connect to K-10, and then maybe eventually on to I-70. But that also opens the door to some possibilities for Edgerton, Gardner, DeSoto, and who knows if they get Sunflower cleaned up one of these days, why, there might be some possibilities there.
Yes, I have a question, and this is probably more for Bob. With the role that you play in attracting new businesses, is there a balance with retaining existing businesses? We all hear, you know, of the wars going on between the states and, you know, even between cities and businesses moving across state lines and so forth. I mean, what is your role in trying to maintain and retain the existing businesses to prevent some of that from happening?
Our role is to add net new jobs to the region. So if a company is in Missouri and they say we're interested in moving to Kansas, or they're in Kansas and we're interested in moving to Missouri, there's really no role for us, because in almost every case, there's no net new growth. So while that is occurring, and we understand that it occurs, while that is occurring, we're going to be in New York and Los Angeles and Tokyo, or wherever we can be, and look for opportunities to attract companies that can add new jobs into the region. And then that company is going to locate somewhere within the region that works best for them. So last week, EC Manufacturing selected Shawnee. And there's reasons why they selected Shawnee. One of them has to do with the fact that there was a building that was just perfect for them. Plus, the folks of Shawnee were warm and welcoming and said, you know what, we want to do business with you. We'd love to have you in town. Lots of other reasons. But our role is not to necessarily be involved in retention for one side or the other, unless the company says, you know, we're going to go to Dallas. Well, then we're going to be all over that. But it is net new growth for the region.
My other question is, you mentioned human knowledge, resources being available. Is there anything that's being done to retain college graduates within this area?
Yeah, let me tell you what we're doing. So we have created a whole suite of products that we make available to companies that are members of our organization. And let's just take KU Med Center, for example, because they use this a lot. Cerner uses it, Garmin, many other companies. When a company is in the business of recruiting somebody to come and work for them from outside this region, we say, look, you get the candidate to fall in love with Garmin, and we'll get the candidate to fall in love with Kansas City. You shouldn't have to do both jobs. Let us help you. So there's a whole series of things that we do that include a customized website. So, Christy, if you were looking at a job in Atlanta or a job in Kansas City with Garmin, and Garmin sent you a website that had your name on it, and there was a link, password protected, it was just for you, and it was about your personal interests, not about the business community, but about you and your family, that'd be pretty impressive. You'd say, hey, those folks in Garmin, they really care about me, and look at all this stuff I can do within this region. Maybe I'll come to Kansas City rather than go to Atlanta. And we do a lot of that. And so that's the role that we've chosen to play within that area.
The ability to provide a qualified workforce is also such a key component to the success of one's economic development efforts. I'm glad to hear the governor talk about, the financial difficulties or decisions that have to be made in the future. Education is something that he said he's going to hold harmless. I hope that happens. If it doesn't, as a community, we're going to have to come together and make some hard decisions. Johnson County Community College is a great asset in that regard. They're already talking about, having developed programs to support some of the activities at the KU Clinical Trial Center for medical technicians, that kind of thing. And so let's not lose sight of that, as we talk about Gardner or we talk about Overland Park or wherever it is, we've got this collective effort that we need to maintain also.
There's a new television commercial on within the last couple of weeks that I have really been fascinated about, because it's hard to convince people when you've been through the economic times that we have that it is going to turn around and that 83 million baby boomers are going to finally retire and there's going to be a workforce shortage. But it's the one where they say by 2020 we will need 20 million college-educated people to fill the empty jobs. And it goes back to, as you said, Christy, where are they living? Because those companies are going to follow where they're living, and quality of life is going to be their issue. And I think that really kind of drives what we're talking about here. The other piece is to watch some of these communities, and Bob's heard me say this before, if you watch some of the trends that are going on, and again, it's somewhat anecdotal, but we're trying to see if Doug Davidson can figure out a way to track it at CIRI. We are able to attract people back to this community when they get ready to have that first child. Now, California great, Austin great, whatever, but they get ready, they want to be back with mom and dad, and if we have a job for them, they want to come back, or they come back for opportunities. So that's, we got to figure out a way to say, by the way, BTW, get back here, and so on. But we are attracting those kinds of employees back to the community, people who went to K-12 here. And we're spending $1.5 billion in Johnson County on K-12. We want them to stay here, so they will continue to produce that kind of tax base. So I think you're right on track as to what you're interested in and where you're looking. I think it's very important long term.
What about telecommuting? Is that in play anywhere as far as attracting? Because I actually think that that's something that's overlooked and is a growing trend, especially with young people who maybe aren't as social as we'd like them to be in the workforce. But, I mean, so how does that play into this? Because you really don't have the brick and mortar buildings.
You know, it's interesting. What we're seeing is not that we are in the business of attracting companies that say, we're not going to have a physical presence, we're going to have our employees telecommute. What we are seeing is companies that are in Kansas City today that have a physical presence beginning to divest themselves of that and putting people in their homes. That is leaving facilities that are coming on the market, and we've got one deal that we're getting close to, and I hate to even talk about it because it's still only 50-50, but if it comes to Kansas City, they'll come in part because there is a large building full of work centers available because the company that currently occupied it decided to have their folks work out of their homes. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but that issue of telecommuting may be beneficial to us in attracting somebody new.
I've got one quick one. Well, may not be quick. I have no idea. It went back to what Bauer. You know, one of the big things that your organization did is it was setting up all the tools that it has now. Is you identified what we are, what we aren't, and what we want. And I think one of the keys that we'll be fighting is identifying who we are, who is our animal health systems to like the Kansas City Metro, and what is that local to Gardner in our halo effect. So what's the process that starts you going down that way? And I think we're unique because of what's coming. We may not be that right now, but we have an opportunity to be that. So how do we start that, and how do we move that from thought process to implementation the way that you've already done as an organization?
I think you're starting it right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've begun.
Is there more to,
I
I guess
think
the question is it deeper to that than just saying, here's what we want? Or, I mean, how much discovery and how do you discover all those pieces? Is it just making sure you're engaged with, you know, citizens, community development, business, or, I mean, I hate to miss out on one step because this is, every day you miss out on it is the day you can't recover it. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Comments?
Well, I think you've got to be inclusive with the community, that's number one, but you probably need someone to help guide you to a professional planner who can look at areas and say, this will fit, this won't fit, and sort of just color on a map until you get it all taken care of. Then you bring the community in and say, what do you think? You'd like it here, you'd like it there. What do you want? You want Hilton, you want Motel 8? That type of thing. Then you get the planners involved to do the overlay, your professional planning staff to do the overlay, and you're there. It's really not a difficult process. The main thing is getting the community to buy in.
Right.
All
Why
look the same
should
direction.
you add this? Why should you need this? What's it going to do for the community? What does it mean? And you hit on it. You don't want to miss a step, but it's kind of boring because you guys know. So it's like, oh, we have to go through this process. And I will go back to Vision Metcalf. Yeah, OP spent $1 million, and they did Vision Metcalf, and they took a year to do it, but they had 4,000 residents show up to more than one meeting to draw on boards what they would like to see on Metcalf to make it dense enough to justify a BRT. Now, it's the same thing that you all can do because it educates your voters as to why you need to do this, but it also gives you the opportunity to dream. You know, we might put this here, there, and the other word. The hard part is staying disciplined to your vision. To basically when somebody comes in and says, well, we'd like to put that there instead, and you kind of go, oh, no, we really, that's, you know, we're kind of holding because that's really what we wanted there, or to stay disciplined to what you really think you wanted. So tonight's the start, and it's an opportunity for you to go through this process and be right poised, as who did the Poised for Growth? Cheryl. Poised for growth, that you're kind of open for business, and here's who we are, and here's what we do, and that kind of thing. So I don't think you're going to miss any steps.
I'd like to share a thought. I remember just after coming to Kansas City, being driven down Renner Boulevard and looking around and thinking, and, you know, it was beautiful, fabulous boulevard, and fountains, and a wide, beautiful boulevard, and just majestic vistas. And I'm driving down the boulevard with somebody from Lenexa, and I'm thinking, either these people are incredibly visionary, or they're completely nuts, because there's nothing here. There is nothing.
And my good friend Mayor Rich Becker.
That's who it was. So now we know the answer.
And what he did was, they started out saying, we want a corporate woods. And the development community said, you can't have one. There won't be another one. That was unique. You're not going to have one of those. And so they built Renner, and look what's happened to it now.
It's there now.
But it took 15 years after they made that decision.
And it's not exactly corporate woods, but
It's close.
Close enough.
It is close. Big tax base.
I think there's a certain amount of boldness that we have to take on as leaders, whether it's this group or the group that comes after us, and just go for the gusto, kind of your point, Mary.
Yep, exactly. Well, shall we wrap it up, Cheryl? A few comments you and I talked about. You know, more so anecdotal than anything else. I remember Mayor Eilert coming back in the mid-'90s from a National League of Cities meeting in California, and he came back kind of surprised by some of the meetings he had, because that's kind of the big cities and so on. But literally, the component that he brought back was successful communities of the future are going to have an incredible partnership between their business community and their city. It will not be adversarial. And it takes both to make it happen. It takes the private side and the public side, the investment side of infrastructure followed by the private side. It takes both to make it happen. And in our communities, as you have seen with your school district, what we've seen in the rest of Johnson County, that is the business community buying into funding a high quality of life. Not just saying, oh, no, we just need cops and roads and utilities, and that's what we want to pay for. So it's that kind of a partnership, I think, is number one. Number two, there's a formula that's been out there for years and years and years, but it kind of epitomizes why a lot of communities go for what they call balance. We don't really have it in Johnson County as much as we did, because somebody keeps messing around with our property tax bases. But here's the deal. Every $1 that a citizen pays, that citizen gets $3 worth of government services. And every $3 a business pays, they get $1 of government services. And so, you know, because there's a lot of services businesses don't need that citizens do, but you got to have the employees. So that's how you get to the balance, is to understand that a business that's willing to pay, businesses willing to pay for the quality of life, and to convince residences, as we have, you know, we go to Shawnee Mission and Blue Valley and whatever all the time and say, excuse me, the commercial tax base in Blue Valley is 62%. They're paying 62% of the bill for that school district. And that's why business needs to be at the table as you go forward. I think the biggest thing tonight is to understand nobody here or whatever is expecting you. Nobody wants you to compare you to anybody else. You don't have to be like anybody else. You don't have to be, okay, we got to be Olathe, or okay, we got to be Great Bend, or we got to be whatever. Be Gardner. And you guys decide. And that's the beauty of what you get. Nobody's deciding it for you yet, as Pete said. If you'll decide, you get to drive your destiny. Successful communities going forward have three really big components. They have a product development component, which is usually the city and the business community. They have a marketing component, which is usually your economic development components. And then they have a philanthropy component that enhances the community. And that's where your not-for-profits and your churches and those groups support. So you don't have to have as many government services as you have. But those three pieces make for a successful community. The soft intangibles, like it or not, those are the parts that don't get to the number. And Bob and I used to have this all the time when we were dealing with projects. And I'd go, well, okay, we don't do any abatements and incentives, and you know, we don't have lots of water and power, and, you know, how can I have a railroad when I don't have a track, and, you know, those kinds of things. And we'd go in and I'd be soft-selling the, oh, aren't we pretty, you know, and Ed would kind of go, yeah, we're doing it. It's that quality of life, soft and tangible stuff. The third people who bought Corporate Woods said nobody in their right mind would pay $110 million for an office park in Kansas City, the metropolitan area. I said, why did you? The productivity and the credibility of the city of Overland Park government. I don't know how to put that on an advertisement of, oh, Lenexa or Johnson County has the best local governments in the Midwest, but that's what you've got, and that's what we've got, and that is really a seller to a business community. They want certainty, they want stability, and they want respect. And so we've all got that here, and that's a big asset going forward. The final piece too is about spin-offs. You've seen a lot of, and Christy, you brought it up, the border wars or et cetera. It's hard to understand about spin-off because everybody has an important job and every business is important. But from an economics perspective, when people go, oh, there's winners and losers, and you sit there and say, wait a minute, every manufacturing job, every distribution job, every corporate office job, every Sprint job, every Garmin job, all of those jobs produce 2.5 to 3 other jobs. You know that, you get that. Your citizens don't usually think that direction. A C-store job, a retail job produces the one, it's. A doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, you don't need any of those unless you have headcount and rooftops. You have two kinds of retail that we all use every day and we're the local guys. And if your people don't work in your city, they're using retail someplace else, you know that. But there's also, as Pete just demonstrated, destination retail, where an IKEA comes in and says, oh yeah, we'll have 2 or 3 million people a year go through there, and it's like, that's more than any attraction in the entire state of Kansas, I think. So it's understanding that, yes, there's a reason that you use incentives wisely to attract the basic employers that produce the 2 to 3 other jobs. And so that becomes a big piece of it. So, did I get it all?
You got it all.
And we're like 7 minutes ahead of time.
Awesome. Great.
Thank you very much. You guys have been just terrific, and it's been such an honor to be here with you today. Good luck.
And thank you very much for taking the time to come down here. I very much appreciate it. We understand that. We have a large development happening next door, and we need to understand that. We need to understand what it means to us, and we need to understand what we want, and that's what we're beginning here tonight. The only question, Pete, I had on the IKEA, when the store comes, do they drop it off in a big truck instead of in a Okay, all right.
Some assembly required.
Well, let me say this, whether city or county, we're all in this together. And so if there's an opportunity that we can make a positive contribution to your efforts, let us know.
We'll do that. Thank you. Commissioner, appreciate it. Thank you all. Thank
Good
you
night.
all very much.
It was great.
Thank you.
See you, Ed.
Bob, good to see you, sir.
Nice job, guys. Can I get a handout? I need that to get the. Thank you very, very much. I think you got it. Yeah, they were kind of going.